little smaller than usual sketch, maybe a little shorter session. I am in Europe. Here's a bit of update. I got a white glove because I'm hoping that the focus in my autofocus in my camera will not get messed up. It might be an adjustment because I might need a little bit of a traction on my fingers, so maybe I'll mess my fingers up a bit with some silicone to be able to hold the pencil better, but let's just see what happens today. And maybe I'll start from the center today. And go outwards. So it is about 9 p.m. in Netherlands. I'm jet lagged, so to my brain it's still 3 p.m. and I feel fresh and ready to do this. Start gently, and the space might be a little bit echoey. What should we talk about today? Let's complain. I was thinking about human nature today, about how humans can be on one hand very intuitive and smart and flexible and considerate, especially as individuals, and then on the other hand as groups they can get tribal, close-minded, rigid, and they can lose their common sense entirely, and they kind of fall into these traps of becoming rigidly radical about their ideas that they get excited about, and there's this whole principle where humans are unable to go with the flow and to go with like more than one option at the time. Like they're like, oh, if you are this, then you cannot be this. Like the examples of some of the isms that we've been historically going through, like capitalism, communism, socialism. Apparently we can't have both of those things. If you're a capitalist, you have to be capitalist to the core. You have to exploit every single opportunity to get richer and even richer, and have that as much money as possible until you amass the amount of money that cannot be spent realistically throughout multiple lifetimes. And then on the other hand, if you are this, then you cannot be showing any signs of interest in socialism, in support network for people who can't amass the massive amounts of money for many reasons, like being unable to work for various reasons. And then the kind of shared responsibility, like, building highways, things that we pay taxes for, they have to be financed somehow. And if you call it socialism or communism, then you get to live in this beautiful palace surrounded by moat and drop bridge, or whatever they call drawbridges, but then you can't move from your place to another place. You cannot commute because the highway is basically one big pothole, because there's nobody who wants to, private citizens could possibly adopt a highway, but it's very unlikely that all the roads will be fixed by private entities. It's like, yeah, great, you have private entrepreneurship, but it's selective. People finance things that they're excited about. Nobody wants to, give money to fix the road, and they would rather drive on a giant pothole-ridden road that's more typical for medieval times, and live in their remote-surrounded mansions than, fix the road for public money. So like, there's this like rigid thinking of like, oh, if you are this, then you cannot be this. Like, why can't we be living in a society that supports entrepreneurship, but at the same time supports the community? It's the best of both worlds. And if you're like, and it goes both ways. Like all the times when people try to implement communism in societies, they became radical in this direction. They're like, oh, nobody can make money now, everybody has to share, and like whoever has some family heirloom, they have to give it up for the good of the people. And then it ended up being that the people was represented by some kind of ruling entity that became corrupt and rich, and then the communist rulers lived in palaces. There was gold toilets, gold everything, and in capitalism the ruling class also lives in opulence and exploits everything and everybody. And like, what's the difference between these two systems? Human greed knows no isms, no bounds. Whereas if you take all of the good elements from all these ideas and implement them, you don't have to get all precious about, oh, I'm only caring about making money and being entrepreneurial. I'm only going to participate in my community if it becomes 100% communist. So there's this like go big or go home mentality that bothers me about humans, that they can't really deal with having things both ways. And sometimes they do want things both ways, but in a totally wrong way, when it's not really called for. So like, yes, you can have things both ways when it's a good idea to do that. It's like, you can't have cake and eat it too. Why not? If you have cake, what's the purpose of having cake when you can't eat it? And then in Polish there's this saying, you get either the fish or the aquarium, and that doesn't make any sense to me, because you can't have fish without the aquarium. You can have aquarium without the fish. You can have shrimp tank, or you can have snail tank, or plants only, but you can't have just fish unless you just buy one to eat. Just fish with no aquarium. But yeah, there's this tendency of like people becoming rigid in their thinking, and then suddenly, someone decides that, shaving their beard or cutting their long beard off, it feels great, and now they like are proponents of having shaved face, but to the point of like forcing others to shave their heads, and by decree now everybody, all the men have to shave their face. And there actually was a period in Tsarist Russia, I'm not sure, I have to look up the circumstances. There was a circumstance in Russian history when the establishment was forcing people to cut off their beards, because I think beards were representing the old times. If you have a beard, you may be either an intellectual or a clergy, and I think there was a push to fight those groups, and like people could be ambushed around the corner in the dark alley by dudes with scissors and have their beards cut off, and like, why? Why can't people have their lives and be left alone? It's sort of like, high school, but forever. In high school there was this like almost a dictatorship of like what clothes to wear, what music to listen to. If you listen to the wrong music, oh boy, you were in trouble. Like you couldn't listen to like, if your peers caught you listening to like disco or like the 80s kind of pop music, even Michael Jackson was frowned upon. You had to listen to something obscure and cool, and a lot of these very cool bands and great music was spoiled for me by people who were kind of claiming it, that were not very nice people. And it's like I still have trouble listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers because I associate the band with the people who were listening to it in my high school, and I was not a fan of those people. It's like I had to relearn to like Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then wearing clothes was also like a big deal. So yeah, you had to be cool. There was no other way in high school. And what was cool, only the cool kids could tell. If the cool kids decided that having short hair was cool, suddenly everybody was shaving their hair, and long hair was no longer cool. And if the cool kids sneezed, then everybody said Gesundheit. When a not very cool kid said the joke, it would go unnoticed. But the same joke told by a cool kid, many laughs. Kind of sounds familiar now in social media. My beef with social media is that it extended the high school experience to everyday life. Where you get influencers who do really the content. Some influencers are proposing is just dull, but because they're so popular, they get good attention. They get a lot of reactions. And if the same people, if other people who don't have that much of following did the same exact thing, had the same exact idea, they wouldn't be perceived as worthy of attention. Yeah, it's always been kind of a challenge to figure out the cool thing. What's the cool thing? Seems like the glove kind of works. I don't know how it's going to come out in the footage, but I also ordered pencils that are white, so the entire wooden part of the pencil will be white, and then when I sharpen it, I can even cover the raw wood part of the pencil with white paint. That way the only dark element on the video will be the graphite part and the drawing itself. And hopefully the camera lens will not go nuts because this could be a little too much for a poor camera lens in the phone. I found phone camera to be optimal for this sort of video, because the camera phone is flattening things and it's kind of has this nice uniform focus. So yeah, I'm just improving the experience for its own sake, for the sake of improvement, and hopefully the less distractions, the better. And I don't quite know exactly where the boundary is, so I'm thinking I'm just going to kind of make the best guess, and hopefully none of the image will go outside of the perimeter. But we get blobs again. This is very hard to avoid. Sometimes progress is very slow, and but if you let it unfold, you're actually letting it develop in the way it wants to, rather than forcing it. So it's almost like waiting for something to happen rather than making it happen. And I might end up with a bunch of almost identical drawings, and then very small adaptations, very small changes can be introduced. It's going to work sort of like adaptation in biology, in evolution, where the gradual, very slow changes were occurring within generations of one species. And then you end up with this whole array of adaptations and external features, internal features that were developing very slowly and very gradually by millions of iterations and repetitions. So that's what I'm kind of hoping to achieve here. Just simply let things develop by extreme repetition. And if I end up with thousands of almost identical blobby drawings, then I'm pretty sure that over time this blobbiness will develop into something else, but it's going to be very gradual. And then when you look at them side by side, then you will see those slightly changed characteristics of each individual drawing. And sometimes the change is so gradual that you won't see the change unless you compare it to the one few generations ahead. So like if you compare one generation of fruit flies to the next generation of fruit flies, you get the identical fruit flies. But if the fruit flies develop into different fruit flies, then few generations later you will compare them side by side, and then you compare, like, you have a comparison between a fruit fly and some kind of animal that doesn't look like a fruit fly at all. But the comparisons between them are so gradual that from generation to generations the changes are imperceptible. It's like a gradient. It's sort of like trying to notice a difference when you're looking at the watch, the analog watch, where you're trying to determine the movement of the arm of the clock that shows you the hours. You just don't see it because your eye doesn't register such a slow change, but you come back to it an hour later and you see that it moved an hour. So that's the nature of change in evolution. And that's why it's so hard to grasp still for many people. Like, how is the evolution able to transform these organisms so radically. It's not radical, it's very slow. The change is only radical because it takes millions, literally millions of years for these organisms to adapt. And sometimes it can be quite a perceptible difference if you're thinking about organisms that have very short lifespan and very quick turnaround of offspring, like fruit flies. That's why fruit flies are great for making experiments, doing experiments with genes. It's just very quick turnaround of individuals. Very quick, short, quick life and good reproduction rate. And then changes that we observe in our everyday life can affect the organisms on the kind of almost generation to generation basis. Like suddenly, the land gets cut off by some sort of body of water, like a river starts flowing, cuts through a land so that it creates like an island, and suddenly the same species of a bird adapts differently to the life on the island because of different conditions. And you can actually see within few generations this bird starts to look different, maybe starts to thrive on different sort of nutrition. It starts to hunt different type of organisms to eat. And sometimes the island versions of a species is exhibiting what we call dwarfism. That's what the scientists call this feature where organisms are becoming smaller when they live on an island, just as an adaptation. It just makes it easier for them to maintain life functions, and everything has a reason. It's not like someone decided that fish is going to look like a fish because it's a fish. No, the fish looks like a fish because it adapts to the conditions that makes this organism thrive in the underwater environment, and even within the creatures and the underwater creatures, adaptations are so varied that you can't really tell that the way fish adapt to the conditions is the only way, because you have crabs, you have jellyfish that swim differently and eat different things, hunt differently, even within fish populations. There are fish that feed from the bottom feeders. They find food on the very bottom, and that's why their mouths are directed downwards. And there are fish that feed from the water column, from the middle, where they evolved their mouths to be facing forward. And then fish who feed from the surface of water have upward facing mouths. So it's all making sense. It's not random. It's all about how you live your life, how you evolve, and that also applies to human lives. We have our own adaptations and things that change us. We can't really avoid change. If we were trying to avoid change, we would just kind of try to live in a void, but it would just turn us into this kind of a blank individual without any sort of influence on its life, without no adaptations. It's pretty much impossible, because even avoiding life is an adaptation. So like if you avoid life, then you become more afraid of life, and you avoid traveling, then you're afraid of other places, you're afraid of people from other places. And sometimes that also doesn't help, because I know of many people who travel the world and they are still bigoted and they still have this very narrow ideas about humans and sharing cultures, and it is kind of there's really no one rule for everything. Like a friend said that, you know, in defense of artists, I think she was kind of biased towards artists. That, you know, if you're an artist, then I think you're pretty much immune from becoming a xenophobe or a bigot, because you have this artistic sensibility. And I have to question this too, because it doesn't really absolve. Being an artist doesn't protect you from all those faults. And I know many artists who are also bigots and who are insensitive and short-sighted. I'm short-sighted sometimes, and being an artist doesn't really change much. Look at all the artists who were assholes. There's a song called Pablo Picasso was never called an asshole, and it's kind of a ironic song, because I bet if anyone was called an asshole, Pablo Picasso was, with no doubt, called an asshole by many people, many times, maybe many times a day even. So like I don't know, I do appreciate Picasso's creativity and art, and the volume, the amount of art he created. But at times I tend to think that, I know it sounds horrible, Picasso to me sometimes feels like he made too much art. It's just over the top, just too much. Just stop, dude. Like he had this unquenchable appetite for life, and you know, just all these bullfights, and he had like dozens of wives throughout his life and lovers, and like he was really living the full life and made way too much art. It almost seems too easy. Like if something seems very easy, I call it the Picasso syndrome. If you see someone who has like unreal skills and is very good at something to the point of like making it look easy, and it's almost hard to notice how much it takes to create such a thing. And if someone cranks out a masterpiece every hour of their life, then it becomes so common that you no longer register it as a masterpiece, and it becomes a little bit too uniform and like, oh yeah, look at Picasso cranked out another one, so what? Whereas if an artist makes something once in a while, maybe once in a few years, and it's like something noteworthy, and you're like, oh, that artist is at it again, and then you appreciate it more because it's more rare. There's a rarity to it. So like it's really, it kind of applies to also sharing things on social media sometimes, when like, let's say this channel is about sketching and fetching, and it's all it is. And then if I somehow happened to crank out an episode twice a day, 3 times a day, no matter how well done and how artistically flawless it is, it would still feel a little too frequent, and people wouldn't find preciousness in it anymore. So like, and there's this trap of like, sometimes, you know, it feels like pressure that you have to really share a lot in order to keep up the interest, and because otherwise people will lose interest and they will forget about your channel. So like, oh, you have to get something at least once a week, and because people are expecting me to, and they're waiting. But there are some content creators who are releasing a very well done video every year. Sometimes they go silent for a few years and then their fans are still waiting, and the fans are always happy to see the new creation. So like there's really no rule. Like, oh, I'm creating my videos too frequently. If you feel the need, then publish it. I did feel a need to record this little session. I'm away, I'm not at home, things are a little uncomfortable, but I also felt like I needed to anchor myself. So it's really, no offense, but it's not really for you, especially that at this stage this channel gets maybe up to 5 views on average, and I don't even think that these are the full views. They're like people checking in and like, oh, okay, do this drawing and talking. Great, let's go fast forward to the final result. Oh, it's just some blobs. Okay, I'll never come back again. But yeah, I would do it if I didn't have my phone with me. I would just draw. Maybe I would just draw and think. I wouldn't think out loud, but thinking out loud is a little different because the thoughts are too rapid for us to like process them. Whereas if we can voice our thoughts out loud, then they slow down, and it just kind of really makes your mind slow down when you can voice your thoughts out loud and you think about how to frame your thoughts, and your thoughts are not so rapid and you don't react to them right away. Like when you think about something anxiety inducing, it takes only a tiny split of a second, and before you know it, you're panicking. Whereas if you are distracting yourself by saying words, it elongates the time required to process these thoughts, even to say it correctly. And then there's this little element of distraction with the drawing that slows you down even more. And it just helps you slow your thinking process to the point of like almost being able to slow down your entire metabolism, your heart rate, your digestion even, and of course your thought process. So that's been kind of a surprisingly healthy activity. I really recommend that. Posting it on YouTube is sort of also a good way to mince my words better, and to also like do a little better with like, I kind of like to have a little bit of a challenge of like how to improve the footage, white glove, white pencil, to help the focus, and should I show the parts of the table or should it be cropped? Should it be just white paper? So it all kind of starts to feel like a challenge, and when it's a challenge, it's kind of fun to kind of solve problems. Alright, there are some blobs and some folds. This is new adaptation, the folds. The folds are starting to replace the blobs, but let's not make assumptions. It's going to be organic change. It's like, oh, I used to be the blob guy, but now I'm into folds, so now I'm going to draw folds from now on. Maybe. That's the kind of trap we fall into. Like, we always try to find, everything we do turns into an identity. I'm the guy who paints horses. I'm the blob guy. I'm the folds guy. I like to eat eggs from the sharp side, and I like to eat eggs from the mellow side, like the societies in Gulliver's Travels book. There was a war between the pointy and dull side of the egg eaters, and you know, speaking of humans and the rigid preferences and forcing them on others. It's like, I like eating eggs from the pointy side, so should everybody else, and I'm going to go to war over it. It's petty. Why not both? Why not eating egg? No, make an omelette. So I think it's a great allegory. I always thought that, like, Gulliver Travels, I read it in college, translated to Polish, but I only knew it from, like, you know, animated movies and stories for kids, and it was kind of edited out to be just fun for kids and kind of absurd. And oh, look, a big giant tied up to the ground. It was kind of like this almost stereotypical scene from Gulliver's Travels, but it really never occurred to me when I was a kid that this book was just this bitter criticism of societies, of different systems we live in, and human behavior. Like, oh, okay. And it's kind of like, it's not really for kids. I wouldn't recommend kids read that book. There's a lot of stuff in the book that I wouldn't rate family friendly. So, like, we have these misconceptions about stories and books, and we sometimes adapt them to be digestible for certain audiences, like the Bible. Many people don't know the Bible in its true form because it's being edited by clergy, by pastors and priests. So for people to read only the bits that are filtered out and family friendly and non-questionable. But then when you start reading it by yourself, it's like, oh, holy cow, what's all that about? Yeah, so I won't go into the Bible study and the atheist versus Christian debate, or religious people versus atheist debate, or afterlife. It's up to you what you believe in. And there are screaming people outside again. This is a noisy street. Oh, it's Saturday night. That's why. See, this is we have a little rare glimpse into what I'm usually up to on Saturday nights. Real exciting. I'm kind of checking where I can extend my graphite. Yeah, it should be fine. And I think I smudged this part with my glove. I can actually tell here. So yeah, it's not ideal. It's sort of a quick one. The travel version. Dutch language is really, there are people out there discussing something, probably the egg eating habits in Dutch, and it sounds very animated and dramatic. But yeah, I'm not sure. I will be in Netherlands for a while. I mean, we're kind of traveling here. Sometimes we like it here. We have some friends here. But it would be kind of cool to learn the language, even though when it comes to foreign languages, Dutch seems one of the most foreign sounding languages to me. It's like, I almost feel like it would be impossible for me to learn. I don't know why. Come on, man, it's Saturday night. What are you doing? Sketching blobs. Yeah, when you get a little older. I mean, I never really was into the kind of the requirement of always going out when it's weekend. Like, oh, it's a party, and it's always the same kind of party. It's always people standing around in the kitchen holding red Solo cups and talking about produce and real estate. And it's like, is there anything else to do? Like, can't you just find a little bit more range in the activities that you can do? Like, I sometimes enjoy the events that are a little bit more like concerts or plays where you can kind of engage with something as an observer rather than participant, because I've always had trouble with improvisational activities where I have to like know how to steer the conversation, make sure to not blurt out something stupid, and not being weird was kind of a big thing because I'm weird. And like I think I embraced my weirdness after the pandemic, although the COVID is still around, but all the precautions, all the pandemic related shutdowns and lockdowns made many people miserable, and this kind of let me embrace my weirdness, and like I feel even more comfortable now about being just like being quiet at social events and like staring or just being. It's kind of like a cat, like where you have like friends over and you talk about some very important stuff, and then your cat walks in and starts, I don't know, grooming, licking its own butt, and just doesn't care. But it's still nice for the cat to hang out in the presence of all these loud apes. That's the kind of way I always have been. Like I like being in the presence of humans, but I don't always feel like being on and engaged. I just want to sit in the corner and groom myself. And that's okay with me, and I don't have to be cool all the time, or funny, or engaging, or interesting. In fact, the more I try to be interesting, the more awkward it becomes, and then I'm like, it gets kind of weird, and when I don't try as much, that's when I can actually relax and be more natural and more entertaining and more interesting. Trying too hard is a hindrance. There's such a thing as trying too hard. And I think I'm aiming for this episode to be a little simpler, a little shorter. But yeah, speaking of traveling, I grew up in Poland in the 80s, and in the 80s Poland was sort of closed off because it was under the rule of Soviet-controlled government, and everything was sort of oppressive, and the borders were closed to all the Western world. You could only travel to the fellow communist countries. Like Yugoslavia or Bulgaria was the most cool place you could go to on vacation if your parents were members of the Communist Party, but or party officials in some capacity. But the borders opened when I was 14, 15, and then suddenly, European Union started forming, and borders were open. There was no need to close the borders because the trade was also open, and there was no more need for smuggling things. You could just go, and I just found it very refreshing. And when I was about 20, it took me a while. I waited 5 years. I before it was time to go back to college, I decided to just go like westwards. So it was like I borrowed some money from a friend, like very small amount of money to just have something in case I need it. I got a tent, a few supplies like some canned food and few necessary supplies, and hitchhiked. I just stood on the side of the road and hitchhiked westwards. And I thought, I had no idea where I'm going. Like, I go to Germany, maybe I'll go to the nearby like German town, maybe I'll visit Dresden, just want to see the world. It was September, and then I was picked up by a man who was driving home from somewhere, I don't remember where. He turned out to be a very decent person. He was the son of a pastor in some German church in Weimar. So I was just talking to him about like what I'm doing, like what my plan is. And then he realized that I don't really have a good plan for this trip. And he said, I'm going to Weimar. If you want to see Weimar, you're welcome to stay at my brother's place, because my brother's flat is empty. He went to Africa. And at this point, we already talked quite a lot throughout the trip. So I kind of vetted him. I was able to vet him, that he wasn't not a creep. I mean, there's always a risk, but you can kind of tell, like, he's the son of the pastor and he has kids and wife and his brother is traveling. It's like, okay, that sounded pretty cool. And I ended up staying in this really cool flat above his place. And so he and his wife, and at this time they only had one kid. We became friends for a while afterwards too. I stayed in his brother's apartment, and then they would like invite me for breakfast and some meals, and then I would go travel around the city. Weimar is a really interesting city because that's where all the romanticism was born, and Goethe, there was Goethe house, Schiele house, and Schlegel, and all these romantic writers and musicians, artists were hanging out, and still the city has this aura of romanticism within it. So the way I wanted to support myself throughout my trip was painting this postcard size views of the city, especially like old monuments. So I would set up near an old museum of some sort or an old church, and I would just paint postcard size views of this object. And then, because I didn't really have a permit to sell stuff on the street, I would just kind of casually paint them and just display them on the side, on the curb, and then someone would, people would come by and ask, what are you doing? And sometimes they would ask, are you selling this? And I said, sure, I can sell some of them. And I would sell them for like a small amount of money, because they're like postcard size paintings. And those I could just sell wherever I went. I had quite a lot of these pre-cut pieces of paper, about this size pretty much, and just some water-based paints. And it was really a freeing realization that I could go anywhere I wanted, paint these little postcards near the monuments. I went as far as south of France, not very far south, just to a town of Blois. Blois is kind of a wine country in France with a castle, and that's where I ended up. And then I realized, it's getting cold, I should probably go back. It's just, so I had to hitchhike all the way back to Weimar, spend some few days there, to tell my new friend about where I've been, and I've been painting those little postcard-sized images in town of Rennes, which is like on the way to Paris, where this Gothic cathedral is. So I would sit near that cathedral and just paint its facade in changing light. And I would get into this flow state as I do here. I just kind of, sit there and paint. The weather was nice and those tourists hustle and bustle, and once in a while someone would be interested and I would sell it to them for like 10 francs even, like that's quite a decent amount of money. I could have food for a day, and then hike to a park, get a tent, put the tent up and sleep there and come back the next day. And then I would keep going. Then I went to Paris and I painted the Eiffel Tower because that's where tourists were. And it was a little more rough in the city because it was a little bit more sketchy, sleeping in the park. Just have like a little kitchen knife with me. And then I hitchhiked back and made it back in one piece, and a great adventure to talk about, to remember. That's probably the most kind of crazy and adventurous thing I've done in my life. And also I really enjoyed that fact that I could be self-sufficient because I could turn cheap rectangles of paper and some cheap paints and my hands into currency, and that gave me enough independence to be able to travel. So that was fun. Now travel is kind of easy, you know, you go on get a plane ticket and then you get to the place and it's safe. There's no uncertainty, and also like because I was by myself, it was a little bit of a different experience. I know of people who traveled hitchhiking that were in a group of cool friends. That was kind of a different experience, probably a lot of bickering too. So there are some advantages to being by yourself, because you don't have to consult every single decision with the group, and everybody has different ideas about where to go and what to do. But as a lone traveler, I made a lot of stupid mistakes. Like I would eat at McDonald's instead of going to a grocery store to get way cheaper food and healthier food. I could get a baguette and cheese, and that could fill up on that. But yeah, I probably would have done it differently. But the point of, learning life is that you will have to screw up. There's no other way. So like if you are living with someone who already knows how to do life, and they keep telling you that you are a screw up and you would never be able to survive by yourself, they know how to do it, but like they make all the decisions for you because they're worried that you will make mistakes. But without making mistakes, there's no learning, and you'll never have an opportunity. If you live with overbearing parents or siblings or partners, they will always treat you like a child, because they will never give you the opportunity to screw up for yourself, to learn from your own mistakes. They will always have ideas for you already pre-cooked. They will tell you what to do, because of course they will have a good point, because they've made those mistakes. But if you can't learn by making mistakes, then you only are going to end up being a pushover or person who always needs guidance. Guidance is great, but if that's all you get in your life, you'll never learn things in a more effective way, because there's no learning like learning from your mistakes. It stays in your memory. All the lessons are firmly embedded in your brain. Whereas when someone tells you the steps, you kind of do it, you're kind of detached and you do it mindlessly, and you don't really learn much. You just wait for directions. So there's moderation in everything. Like I wish I had someone give me advice about like what's the best way to survive a trip like that. And I also am very bad at asking for help or for advice, and Sometimes I don't even know what to ask about. And then someone points out my mistakes while they see me do them and I get offended. Alright, so I feel like the jet lag is kicking in a little bit. So I will slowly try to taper off my engagement with this sketch. I have some folds here, that's a new thing, folds and some blobs too. Let's see what it looks like in the frame. It's almost straight, there's some mess on the side here, and these things annoy me, but it's a travel version. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you travel somewhere, do something fun.